Imagine catching your spouse in the most unexpected way. At a secret event you weren't supposed to know about. This story is full of shocking revelations, betrayal, and a twist you won't see coming. The spacious hotel room buzzed with about 70 to 80 people. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the various scenes unfolding on the mats. Two lively women explored each other, drawing approving murmurs from nearby older couples. Then I saw her. The turtle tattoo above her left ankle confirmed her identity. A man in black beside me offered unsolicited commentary. "It crashes like a house door in a storm of fresh force," he mused. A woman chimed in. "She really enjoys taking care of multiple partners at once. We've been with her before. My name is Jason, and I'm a successful independent project manager, known for my change management work. People in the industry call me Jason the Terminator for my ability to solve high-stakes problems quickly. My wife, Lisa, is 45 years old and works as a senior business consultant. We've been together for 20 years, and we met during our MBA program at Stanford. Over the years, we built a consulting firm, Strategic Consultants LLC, where our complementary skills created a powerhouse team. Lisa excels at long-term planning for corporate clients, while I tackle immediate operational challenges. We live in Denver, Colorado, and have two twin daughters, Sophia and Olivia, who are now in college. Our lives had settled into a comfortable rhythm, though Lisa has always had a more spontaneous side that sometimes led to financial carelessness. Still, our different approaches to life made us a strong team both personally and professionally. When Lisa traveled for work, I enjoyed the solitude. She never questioned when I was away for a week-long consulting assignment either. Once our daughters left for college, I had grand visions of spicing up our social lives, romantic trips to Napa or weekends in New York City. But life doesn't always go according to plan. One Sunday, while tidying up the house, I came across a credit card receipt from the Monroe, a high-end country hotel about 30 miles from our home. The total amount was suspiciously high, suggesting a meal for two. Assuming it was just a client dinner, I pocketed the receipt to ask Lisa about it later. Sundays had always been family time for us, and now that our daughters were away, they kept the tradition alive by calling us. That day, Lisa was on the phone with Olivia, the more level-headed of our two daughters. Meanwhile, Sophia was the one who often found herself in emotional turmoil. I returned from the garage to hear Lisa giving her usual advice. "Move on. There's plenty of fish in the sea. Don't dwell on it." I assumed Sophia had another relationship issue. Unlike Lisa, I'm more of a take your time, think it through kind of person. I'm a believer in festina lente, make haste slowly. Ultimately, it was Sophia's decision, so I chose not to intervene. Instead, I headed to the kitchen to prepare our usual Sunday roast. There's something calming about cooking, especially with a glass of Merlot in hand. By the time we sat down to dinner, Lisa filled me in on our daughter's latest updates. Olivia was doing great, excelling in her studies, while Sophia had just broken up with her boyfriend after a misunderstanding at a party. She kissed someone else, and her boyfriend found out. Lisa thought Sophia should just move on and enjoy life, while I suggested giving it time and not rushing into anything new. Post-dinner, I took Buddy, our dog, for a walk, while Lisa prepped for her next client meeting. Later, we both went to bed, but I found myself tossing and turning before finally falling asleep. Lisa came to bed late, and by the time morning rolled around, she was already up and dressed. I woke up to Buddy's wet nose in my face, his not-so-pleasant morning breath a reminder that it was time to get moving. After taking him for his morning walk, I joined Lisa in the kitchen. Neither of us were morning people, so it was a quiet, coffee-fueled start to the day. We chatted briefly about the weather and the terrible Denver traffic before she gave me a quick kiss and left for her day. It wasn't until later that day that I remembered the receipt from the Monroe Hotel. I pulled it out of my wallet and placed it on Lisa's desk. The timestamp read 10:18 p.m., likely an overnight stay, but the timing didn't add up. It seemed unusual for Lisa to be staying at a local hotel when she could have just driven home. Maybe it was a late work event? I could ask her about it later, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check my calendar to see where I had been that week. According to my schedule, I had been out of town on a project, and Lisa was supposed to be up north for a 3-day client visit. The strange part was that the receipt was dated the day after she had supposedly left. It indicated she had stayed just 30 miles away rather than making the long trip upstate. If this were work-related, I could have easily driven her and saved the expense of a hotel. Sitting at her desk, I couldn't pinpoint anything suspicious in her recent behavior. We were still intimate regularly, and she didn't seem distant. However, I couldn't shake the thought that this receipt might be evidence of something else entirely. I was confused and frustrated. Lisa had always been upfront with me, or at least I thought she had. If she were involved with someone else, wouldn't she have used one of my absences to be with them? Why book a hotel so close to home? As I pondered these thoughts, it dawned on me that she might be doing something similar during her current business trip. I dialed the number on the receipt, hoping to clear things up. A polite receptionist answered, and I asked if I could be connected to Mrs. Amanda Caldwell, the name Lisa often used for hotel reservations. The receptionist apologized, explaining that check-in wasn't until noon, and it was only 10:30 a.m. She offered to take a message, but I declined. Hanging up, I felt no closer to an answer, and the confusion continued to build. I made another cup of coffee and considered my next move. Sitting idly wouldn't solve anything. Unlike some people who shy away from confronting problems, I knew I had to face this head-on. There might be an innocent explanation, or this could be something far worse. Either way, I needed to find out the truth. By noon, I was already on my way to the Monroe Hotel. Upon arriving, I noticed a small sedan parked in the lot, a car that looked a lot like Lisa's. I decided to call her cell phone. She answered almost immediately, giving me an excuse about being stuck in traffic and dealing with a highway accident. I listened patiently, all the while scanning the parking lot for signs of her. The story didn't add up. Something was definitely off. I walked into the hotel and glanced around the lobby. There was no sign of Lisa, but the hotel had a calming atmosphere that belied the tension inside me. I checked the brasserie, the hotel's small but upscale restaurant. But again, there was no sign of her. Deciding to bide my time, I settled into a corner of the lobby bar with a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a drink and tried to blend in, watching the comings and goings of the guests. As I waited, I noticed a large bulletin board listing the hotel's daily events. Monday was relatively quiet, except for a private party happening at the spa and fitness center later that evening. My curiosity piqued. I approached the front desk to ask about it. The receptionist was polite but evasive when I inquired about the event. Later, back at the bar, I struck up a conversation with the bartender. He was chatty, and after a few minutes of casual talk, I mentioned the private event. His demeanor changed slightly, and with a knowing look, he told me that the private party was part of a regular event for adventurous couples from the area. People in open relationships. "Ever heard of the Denver Lifestyle Club?" he asked, winking. "Just look it up. They host events here every couple of weeks." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Could Lisa be involved in something like this? My mind raced as I pulled out my phone and searched for the club's website. Sure enough, for a small annual membership fee, you could attend events, including tonight's Mellow Moments mixer at the hotel spa. The description was vague, but it was clear that these parties were for couples exploring non-traditional relationships. Was Lisa here for this? I had to find out. I joined the club online, paying the fee without a second thought. Immediately, I checked our financial statements and found several payments labeled SBC Services, the club's discreet billing name. My suspicions were no longer just doubts. They were becoming reality. Determined to uncover the truth, I made my way to the spa later that evening. The receptionist at the spa's front desk sold me a mask and some supplies, assuring me that everyone at the event was friendly and welcoming. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked toward the gym, where the party was already in full swing. I donned the mask as I entered the gym, unsure of what I'd find, but bracing myself for the worst. The atmosphere was warm and intimate. Soft lighting, quiet jazz playing over the speakers, and about 70 or 80 people mingling throughout the room. The organizers had tried to create an environment where people felt comfortable enough to let go of their inhibitions. I counted several mats, each covered with white sheets spread across the floor. Around the mats, people gathered in various states of dress. Some fully clothed, others in lingerie or completely naked, some with masks, others without. I felt completely overdressed in my jacket and trousers, but I didn't dare take them off. My mission wasn't to participate, it was to observe, and more importantly, to confirm my worst fears. The first group I came across was watching two young women exploring each other's bodies. The crowd murmured in approval as they moved, their actions slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment. Nearby, two older couples were engaged in a different scene, their aging bodies glistening under the dim light as they embraced. It reminded me of a strange and unsettling version of a dance that had gone very wrong. Then, I saw her. Lisa. She was at the back of the room, her body covered in sweat, naked, with two young men, both of whom looked to be of Asian descent. I knew her immediately, even without seeing her face. The small turtle tattoo above her left ankle gave her away. She wasn't wearing a mask, but it wouldn't have mattered. I could have recognized her anywhere. There she was, my wife, participating in the kind of scene I'd never imagined her in. Around her, about 8 or 9 spectators stood watching, occasionally commenting or offering encouragement to the participants. Fully dressed and with my mask securely on, I made sure to keep my distance. I had no intention of revealing myself or confronting her here. My sole objective now was to gather evidence. I pulled my phone out from inside my jacket, keeping it concealed in the palm of my hand. The spa had made me sign a confidentiality agreement when I joined, but at this point, I didn't care. I needed proof, and I would deal with the legalities later. With the camera recording discreetly, I focused on getting a clear shot of Lisa's face and the scene unfolding in front of me. Her identity would be obvious, but I could always blur the faces of the others later if necessary. I stood still, my heart racing as I watched the scene, trying to hold back the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Next to me, a middle-aged man in a black shirt and pants seemed eager to provide running commentary. "It breaks like a house door in a storm of fresh force," he said, stating the obvious to no one in particular. There was a brief pause before he added, "Just look at how she's keeping up with this pace." "Yes, she really enjoys taking care of 2 or 3 men at once," a woman chimed in. She was completely naked, standing next to a man who was equally undressed. They looked to be around Lisa's age, maybe a few years older. "We've been with her before. I'm sure she'd be delighted if you wanted to join us." The man in black nodded. "That sounds tempting." As they spoke, I could feel my world collapsing around me. A part of me wanted to scream, to confront Lisa, to demand answers. But I pushed those emotions deep down, locking them away for now. I had to stay focused, clear-headed. My only goal was to get the evidence I needed and get out of there. Once I was sure I had enough footage, I turned off the camera and started to make my way toward the exit. The woman at the spa reception looked surprised to see me leaving so soon after arriving, but I made up an excuse about forgetting something in the car and promised to return later. Outside, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to come to terms with what I had just seen. My wife was not only cheating on me, but she was also doing so in the most public and humiliating way possible. The trust I thought we had was shattered in an instant, and everything we had built together suddenly felt like a lie. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My stomach churned as if I had been hit with food poisoning. I tried to take deep breaths, but it didn't help. The overwhelming sadness and betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, and I had no choice but to sit there in the car, letting the reality of the situation sink in. As I began to calm down, my mind started racing, building walls around the pain and anger that had started to consume me. I had always been good at managing change in my professional life, but this was personal, and no amount of change management training could prepare me for this. Still, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to waste time pretending everything was okay. I had seen the evidence with my own eyes, and now it was time to accept the inevitable and take control of the situation. By the time I drove home that night, a plan was already forming in my mind. When I got home, I took Buddy for a quick walk to clear my head. My mind was buzzing with thoughts of what I'd seen, but I needed to process it slowly, piece by piece. Back at the house, I poured myself a glass of Glenfiddich and sat down in the living room, staring at nothing. Sleep wasn't an option that night. My mind was running on overdrive. The next morning I woke early, feeling emotionally drained but determined to take action. I packed a few essentials and took Buddy with me on a long drive to Newport Beach, a coastal town known for its wealthy residents and relaxed atmosphere. For years, I had dreamed of retiring by the ocean, and though that dream now seemed distant, the fresh sea air was something I desperately needed. As I drove, I thought about my next move. At first, I considered driving out of the country, maybe to Canada, but crossing the border with Buddy wasn't feasible without the proper paperwork. And in truth, I didn't need to run away. I needed to confront the situation head-on. I stopped at a small animal shelter just outside Newport Beach. The woman at the shelter was kind, but I could tell she was used to hearing sad stories from pet owners. I handed Buddy over, claiming that I had found him wandering the streets without a collar. She recognized the breed immediately and asked if he was a Shih Tzu, and I nodded. Her attention to detail was a relief. I couldn't bear to explain the real reason I was leaving Buddy behind. Afterward, I headed to a nearby diner for a late breakfast. I sat there with a cup of black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, trying to figure out my next steps. My thoughts drifted back to Jim Carson, an old business associate of mine who ran a competing consulting firm. Jim had always been competitive, but over the years, we'd developed a cordial relationship. In fact, a few years ago, he had tried to recruit Lisa and me to work for him. We had politely declined back then, but today, I had a different proposition in mind. I called Jim from the diner and proposed a business deal that would allow me to offload my share of the consulting firm Lisa and I had built. Jim was interested, and despite the suddenness of the offer, he agreed to meet me the next day. He was smart enough to know that my urgency worked to his advantage. Returning to Denver that evening, I felt more prepared. I called Lisa on the drive back, but my anger had simmered down enough that I could speak without giving away my feelings. When she picked up, I calmly explained that Buddy had run out of the yard and was hit by a car. "What? Is he okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Lisa, but he didn't make it. A passerby saw him run into the street and the driver didn't stop. I buried him in the garden," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. She sobbed uncontrollably on the other end of the line, devastated by the news. But I wasn't moved. My mind was elsewhere, already planning the next steps in my escape from our marriage. The next day, my meeting with Jim went exactly as expected. He was more than happy to buy me out of Strategic Consultants LLC, especially with the terms I had proposed. In exchange for my shares, Jim would take over the firm and pay me a significant amount, including the company's cash reserves. Lisa, however, would remain on board as a consultant for 2 years, under Jim's management. After finalizing the deal, I drove to a local real estate agency and inquired about selling our house. It was a prime property, and I knew it would fetch a high price on the market. As I left the agency, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. Later that evening, I didn't call Lisa back. I knew she would be expecting me to comfort her after the news about Buddy, but I had no desire to play the caring husband any longer. I needed distance, both emotionally and physically. That night, for the first time in days, I slept well. The following morning, I woke up feeling more focused than I had in weeks. I packed my things, taking only what I needed, and made an appointment with a family lawyer in Boulder. The town had always amused me, with its quirky name and laid-back culture. But today it seemed like the perfect place to begin the next phase of my plan. The lawyer was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, taking notes as I laid out the details of Lisa's infidelity and my desire for a divorce. Though sympathetic, she urged caution. "I understand this is a difficult time, but I recommend thinking through the long-term consequences before making any decisions that could affect your financial future." For a moment, I wondered if she was just trying to pad her billable hours, but I reminded her that we could always withdraw the petition if necessary. I wasn't planning to back down, but having a fallback plan was comforting. After some discussion, She agreed to file the divorce based on Lisa's infidelity. That evening, I decided to make dinner, something simple but comforting. Lisa came home late, her eyes still red from crying over Buddy. I offered her a hug, not out of sympathy, but as part of the act I was now playing. Over dinner, I casually mentioned a new contract I'd taken in North Carolina, which would require me to be away for an extended period. She seemed too distracted to ask many questions, still reeling from the loss of our dog. Later, as we watched TV, I savored the bitter irony of our situation. Here we were, sitting side by side like any other couple, while I quietly planned my exit from our marriage. Lisa still had no idea what was coming. My trip to North Carolina turned out to be a success. The deal I had negotiated with the directors there would keep me occupied for the next 6 months, possibly longer. All expenses were covered, and they even offered to pay for relocation and housing. It was the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. While in North Carolina, I received a call from Lisa about the fish tank at home. Apparently, the fish had all died. "They just floated to the top," she said, her voice tinged with confusion and sadness. "What do you think happened?" "I'm not sure," I replied, feigning ignorance. In reality, I had stopped feeding them before I left, ensuring they wouldn't last long. It was petty, but it gave me a small sense of control over a situation that had spun wildly out of my hands. The following weekend, I made a brief trip back to Denver to sort through some paperwork. The atmosphere at home was somber, with Lisa busying herself with chores to keep her mind off the loss of Buddy and the fish. We had a quiet evening together, sipping wine and watching mindless TV. Neither of us was in the mood for intimacy, and I found myself retreating emotionally, the distance between us growing with each passing day. Surprisingly, I slept well that night. By the time I woke up, the initial shock of Lisa's betrayal had faded into a grim resolve. I knew what I had to do. I spent the morning packing up my things, and after lunch, I kissed Lisa goodbye and headed back to North Carolina. I left my bags packed, unsure of when or if I would return. A few days later, Lisa was blindsided when the divorce papers arrived. She had thought they were just documents from one of my projects and hadn't realized what she was signing. I made sure my phone was off that day, giving myself some space from the inevitable barrage of calls. That evening, after turning my phone back on, I found several voicemails from Lisa. Her voice was panicked, desperate. "What's going on, Jason?" she demanded in one of the messages. "You need to call me back. This isn't funny anymore." When I finally called her, she was fuming. "What the hell is this? Divorce papers? Are you serious?" I remained calm. "Yes, Lisa. I'm very serious. This isn't funny, Jason. Stop it." "It's not a joke," I replied, "and it's too late to stop." "What are you even talking about?" she asked, her voice cracking with frustration. "Hensley House Hotel, Bottom Sub Club," I said bluntly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Lisa finally spoke again. "I'm so sorry, Jason. I never thought you'd find out." "Well, I did," I said coldly. "And it hurts." We agreed to talk in person that weekend. When I came home, Lisa was waiting, clearly anxious. I left my bags packed, still unsure of what I wanted out of the conversation. True to form, Lisa made us tea. As we sat down, she finally began. "This is all my fault," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I gave in to temptation and I can't undo that." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I found the Bottom Sub Club by accident, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. You were away the first time I went. I was so nervous, but I wore a mask and figured I could just watch. But when people approached me, it was thrilling. Before long, I was participating. It was nerve-wracking at first, but it felt exciting." She paused, looking at me with hopeful eyes. I nodded, but didn't say anything. "Jason, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you, but I didn't know how." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You're right, Lisa," I said slowly. "You should have told me. But now it's too late for that." Her eyes widened as I continued. "I agree. Sex with others can be fun. I said. But only if both people in a relationship agree to it. You went behind my back. She tried to interject, but I raised my hand to stop her. What you did isn't something I can just forget or brush aside. You betrayed me. Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. I didn't think it would get this far. I love you, Jason. Our life together is amazing. I know I messed up, but I never thought this would break us. I shook my head. It's not that simple, Lisa. Love doesn't excuse what you did. You violated my trust. I was stupid, she pleaded. But it was just physical, an exciting adventure, nothing more. It doesn't change how much I love you. I wish I could believe that, I said, my voice calm but firm. But it's not just about love. It's about respect. It's about honesty. And you took that away from me. Lisa's shoulders slumped, defeated. Can't we think about the consequences before deciding? Do we really need to end this? I've already thought about the consequences, and I'm unlikely to change my mind, I said, standing up. I can't stay in this marriage knowing what I know. I grabbed my coat, ready to leave for the riverfront, a bar I frequented when I needed time to think. It wasn't anything special, just a local spot on the edge of downtown. But it was quiet, and the bartenders knew when to leave you alone. As I drove, my mind raced with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. I didn't like how things had turned out, but at least I had taken control of the situation. Later that evening, I returned to the house to find Lisa making dinner. I moved my things to the guest room and sat down at the table, where we talked about our daughters. The conversation was civil, but the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Lydia had taken Lisa's advice and was trying to move on from her ex, while Olivia seemed to be thriving in her new relationship. It felt strange to discuss such mundane things after what had happened, but I let Lisa believe we were still playing the role of a normal couple for the time being. The next morning, I packed up my things for the drive back to North Carolina. Lisa seemed confused when she saw me loading the car. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm headed to North Carolina. I need to get back to work," I said. "You're leaving me here? What about us?" I sighed. "You were asleep when I packed. Use one of the other cars." "Fine," she replied, clearly frustrated. "Just don't damage anything." The next day, I traded the car I had driven for a red Mazda MX-5 convertible. It felt like a small victory, but one I savored. Lisa was livid when she found out. "How could you sell the car without telling me?" she demanded. "It's registered in my name," I replied calmly. "And you don't need it." "That's not fair, Jason." "Neither was what you did," I said, holding her gaze. "You'll have to accept that things have changed." She called me daily after that, begging me to return and talk things through. But I stayed distant, focusing on my new job and the fresh start it provided. I also sold my shares in Strategic Consultants LLC, ensuring that Lisa no longer had control over the company's finances. When she learned what I'd done, her rage reached new levels. "Jason, how could you do this? That money was for our retirement." "I know," I replied coldly. "But you didn't need my approval to sleep around, and I didn't need yours to make financial decisions." Finally, she grasped the reality of the situation. I had moved on, and she was left trying to piece together the remnants of our life. Our house sold quickly to Redwood Property Associates, a firm I secretly controlled through a series of shell companies. It was a prime property, and I made sure Lisa didn't know who the buyer was. In the weeks that followed, Lisa called about a few other things: the wedding dress she had saved for Olivia, the jewelry I had given her over the years. I lied, telling her I had no idea where the dress had gone, even though I had sold it to a vintage shop in Raleigh. As for the jewelry, I had already stashed the most valuable pieces in a safe deposit box. I didn't want any part of our past to linger with her. The final blow came when Lydia called, clearly upset. "Dad, Mom just found out that the diamond ring you gave her years ago, the one that symbolized eternal love, is a fake. It's practically worthless." I couldn't help but smirk. "Oh no, that's terrible. I didn't realize." In truth, the real ring was sitting in a vault at my bank. Maybe one day I'd give it to someone new, someone who hadn't betrayed me. As I drove through North Carolina, the weight of the past finally began to lift. I had taken control of my future, and I was ready to leave Lisa behind.